In this episode, I'll be showing how you can make some paper ghosts, like this one that you can see here. Hello and welcome back. So before we get started on these, I do just want to quickly point out that while these models can obviously be used for any adventure, the reason I'm making them now is because they appear in one of the encounters that I'm writing for the dungeon box. You know, the thing that I made in the last episode. Actually, the next couple of videos, they're also going to feature stuff that I'm working on for the dungeon box adventure, but as I say, they don't have to be used just for that. Anyway, now that that's all out of the way, let's get started on the tutorial. Okay then, the first thing we'll need to do is print out the paper textures. You can find a link to these in the description. And we'll print out all of the different shapes onto one side of the page, and the kind of cloth texture on the reverse, making sure that you print it so that it's in the orientation that you can see here, i.e. it doesn't need to cover the chains at the bottom of the page. And since I just mentioned the chains, that's what we'll make first, so I'll just cut them away from the rest of the paper. Right then, we'll start by first cutting one side of the chain to size, then scoring it down the middle, and then cutting the other side of the chain as well. After which, we can also trim away the excess paper from either end with a pair of scissors. And if I then bring it a bit closer to the camera, you can see how we can fold it along the scored line. Though, being so small, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to get it started, but once you've got it started, the rest folds easily enough. Anyway, we'll then unfold it and apply some glue to the back with a glue stick, and then simply fold it back in half, being careful not to tear it. And when it's done, it should end up looking something like this. So, a thin strip of paper with a chain pattern on either side, which we'll then leave to dry. Okay then, so while that's drying, we can start on the ghost itself. And for this, we'll need to roughly cut out one of the star shapes, and then cut it to size. Though, when doing this, I try to cut the edge into a slightly wavy shape. It's hard to see in the video, so I'll put a graphic on the screen to better explain what I'm actually doing here. And when we've done that, we can then add some tears to the cloth, and the way I like to do this is to add 3 or 4 cuts along either side in one direction. There you go. And then make 2 or 3 cuts along each side in the opposite direction. And then just repeat that for all 4 of the points. But admittedly, that might have been a little bit difficult to see, so here's another graphic to show things a bit clearer, you know, while I cut out the rest. And there you go, we're aiming for something like that. Okay, next we'll scrunch that up, and then unfold it again, just to give it some folds and creases. Like so. Then, for this next part, we're going to need a regular sized drinking straw. And from that, we'll cut a piece that's somewhere between 1 inch and 3 centimeters long. And as you can see, you'll need to use a black straw for this, but if you don't have any black straws, it's easy enough to take a Sharpie and just colour one in, like I've done here. Anyway, next we can add a blob of hot glue to the inside of the straw, and stick the middle of the star shape into that glue, which should result in this kind of thing. Then we can add a tiny bit of glue to the inside of each of the points, and then stick those down to the side of the straw as well, which is what you can see me doing here, though I am only doing this in one small area, roughly halfway down the point itself. And that should end up looking something like this. Okay then, next we'll take that little chain that we made earlier, and now that it's dry, we can scrunch that up a little bit, kind of like a concertina, so back and forth on itself, just so that it doesn't look quite so flat. And then, after a quick test fit, we can glue the end of that into one of the kind of the folds near to the top of the straw, if that makes sense, and then wrap that around the straw in a kind of crisscross pattern, cut it to size, and then glue the other end into place as well. It's pretty hard to describe exactly what I've done there, but here it is now that the chain's been glued into place. That's what we're aiming for. Anyway, next we'll take another one of the star shapes, which I've already cut out and made look a bit tattered, and we're just going to stick that to the top again. But this time we'll rotate it 45 degrees so that it's not being stuck on at the same angle as the last one. Basically, something like this, so that when we fold the points down, they're now covering the gaps between the previous ones. And once we've done that, we can take what's left of the chain and do a similar thing again with that. So we'll glue one end between one of the gaps, and then wrap that around the straw in a kind of bandolier fashion. So here I am trimming it to size again, and in this instance I'm using a toothpick to make more of a hole for the opposite end to be glued into, and then gluing the chain into that hole and using the toothpick again to help me push it inside. So yeah, this is what it looks like with 2 layers of cloth and 2 layers of chains. Okay, for this next part we'll need a tiny straw, or a toothpick, or barbecue skewer, it doesn't really matter which, and I'm just going to cut a couple of pieces to a more manageable size. Then we'll just need to decide which side looks best as the front of the ghost. I usually choose a side where most of the chains are showing, and then glue a little straw on either side to represent the arms, like you can see me doing here. And this is what we're aiming for, so something similar to a scarecrow. We can then take a sharp pair of scissors and trim most of those away. So this kind of thing that you can see here. As these aren't actually going to be the arms, we just need them to give some shape to the shoulder area. Anyway, next we'll cut out the cloak, and again you can see that I've already scrunched it up and made some cuts along the 3 main edges, and all we'll do then is run a line of hot glue along the back of the shoulder area and then stick the short end of the cape into place. So this kind of thing that you can see here. And what I like to do then is to kind of form it into a more dynamic shape, usually slightly off to one side. So something like that. Okay, so next we'll take the diamond shaped piece, which again I've roughed up off screen, and we're just going to glue that to the top, roughly centralised, with the longer sides pointing out to where the arms would be. Essentially this kind of thing, with the darker side on the underneath. Then, using the glue gun, we can add a spot of glue to the underneath of the 2 shorter points of the diamond shape, and stick them down to the front and the back of the piece. Though we are going to try and keep some of the crumpled up texture and not squash it down too flat. And there you go, that's the kind of thing that I mean. And once we've done that, we can bend the longer ends over the shoulders and try to make it look like they're drooped over invisible arms. So, so it looks a bit like this. Now, for the head, we'll take the black straw again, and we're going to cut out a piece that's this shape here. It's a bit hard to see, but it's around 5mm long, and the ends have been cut at a slight angle, like you can see in the graphic. And all we're going to do is put a little blob of glue in the neck area, and stick this piece on top so that it's angled slightly forwards. So, this kind of thing that you can see here. Though it is hard to tell, but trust me, it is leaning slightly forward. Anyway, next we'll take the triangular piece, which I've prepared in the same way as the other pieces, though it is worth noting that I haven't done much to the curved front side. Then it's just a matter of adding more glue to the top of the straw, and then sticking the hood into place, making sure that it overhangs the front by around 1mm or so. And it needs to be in this orientation that you can see here. So yeah, something like that. Then we're just going to put a tiny bit of glue on the inside of each side of the hood and stick those down into place on either side of the face. Well, it's not really a face, but you know what I mean. You can see the kind of thing that I'm doing on the screen. I'm just trying to get that classic hooded wraith-like appearance. And when we've done that, we can also do a similar thing at the back of the hood, but again, we're going to try and keep some of the folds and creases and not squash it down too flat. So yeah, this is what it looks like after we've finished all of that. And as you can see, it really is starting to take shape now. And because I had a short length of the chain left, I'm going to use that to add a few extra pieces that are just kind of hanging down freely, rather than being wrapped around the ghost. So that's all I'm doing here, just gluing them into place and then cutting them to length. Though I will say that when working with such small amounts of hot glue, you do need to be quick. Otherwise, it can set before you manage to get it into position, which is what happens here. I have to peel off the old glue and then apply some more. And luckily, I managed to get it glued into place on the second try. And when that's done, the last thing we'll need to do is glue it to a base. Now, you could use a square of any of the existing floor textures for this, or like I've done here, one of the circular bases that I added to the modifications and requests PDF a little while back. But yeah, it's then just a simple matter of gluing the model to the base, as you can see. So there you go, there's a little ghost miniature. Though in the dungeon box, which is what I'm making this for, it's actually going to be a custom monster. Though you can of course use these for any kind of ghost or spirit or, anything like that. And while they're obviously not as good as nicely painted proper models, I think they should work well enough. Anyway, here's a picture of the 4 that I've made, and like I said at the beginning, in the next couple of videos I'm going to be adding the final touches to the dungeon box. All the miniatures you'll need, and a couple of player handouts, so hopefully you'll join me for those. But yeah, I'll end this one by saying thank you very much for watching. As always, feel free to let me know what you think of these, and if you'll be making any yourself, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.